People survived the Sahara with methods that should have killed them long before the sun did. They followed animals as if they were maps, lived on insects when nothing else remained, and protected single drops of water like treasure. Every step was a negotiation with heat, hunger, and silence. Tonight you will walk with them into the desert and feel how survival was stitched together from almost nothing. So, before you feel comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel only if your heart truly wants to. If you do like it, leave a little comment letting me know what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights. Adjust the pillow to fit your head. Maybe turn on a fan to create a relaxing atmosphere. And let's begin this journey together tonight. If a traveler were to step into the Sahara without guidance, the first shock would not be the heat itself, but the realization of how quickly the body begins to fear the absence of water. The dryness settles into the throat with a quiet violence, and every breath feels as if it removes something vital. In such an environment, hunger becomes an irrelevant concern. Thirst is the force that rules every thought. For the people who have lived here for generations, this reality is not dramatic or unusual. It is simply the structure of life, the silent rule that shapes every decision long before anything else is considered. Water is not treated as a resource in the Sahara. It is treated as existence itself. People wake thinking about it and sleep thinking about it. Even the smallest journey must be measured by how much water can be carried, how much can be spared, and whether any can be found along the way. Outsiders often imagine the desert as an empty landscape, but those who have survived it know how full it is of signs. The pattern of dunes, the direction of the wind, a faint line of vegetation, and the slight change in soil color, each detail, is all clues that may indicate moisture hidden beneath the surface. Families and entire communities depend on their ability to read these silent signals. A single mistake can mean the difference between survival and disappearance. Digging wells is a task performed with a mixture of hope and resignation. Men carve through layers of sand with tools worn down by years of use. The early hours of digging often feel pointless, nothing more than scraping into a dry tomb, but occasionally the sand cools, darkens, and begins to clump together. A thin layer of moisture hints that the well might succeed. At times, though, the earth remains completely dry, forcing the community to abandon days of work and search elsewhere. Those wells that do succeed become sacred places. The water drawn from them is measured with precision, and the rules surrounding its use are strict. Children are raised with the understanding that even a small mistake, a careless spill, a selfish choice can threaten everyone. Water is carried and stored as if it were a fragile life that could disappear at any moment. Elders guard the wells not out of authority but out of necessity. Experience has taught them how easily the desert can reclaim what little it offers. Travel across the Sahara depends on similar discipline. People move before sunrise when the air is still bearable. Speaking too much is discouraged, as even a few unnecessary breaths can intensify dehydration. The rhythm of walking is slow, controlled, and intentional. Travelers do not race the desert, they negotiate with it. Each step is calculated, and each pause is part of conserving the water already inside the body. Knowledge is not kept in books, but in memory, stories passed down across generations about where rain once fell, where former wells collapsed, where a traveler was saved by a hidden pool beneath a patch of stubborn grass. These stories form a living map, one that shifts as the desert shifts. The land may erase landmarks overnight, but memory preserves what the sand refuses to hold. Storms present the greatest threat. A well can be buried completely within minutes, leaving no trace of its existence. Footprints vanish instantly. Travelers who lose orientation during a storm often do not survive long enough to correct their course. When the wind settles, the desert appears deceptively calm, as if nothing had happened. But the absence of familiar markers creates silence of a different kind, one filled with uncertainty and fear. In these moments, communities rely on elders, whose memories contain the only remaining map. For those unfamiliar with the desert, it is easy to underestimate its severity. They come with tools, supplies, and confidence, believing that strength will carry them through. But the desert makes no allowances for pride or ambition. It recognizes only knowledge: how to listen to the land, how to identify faint signs, how to endure the hours when the sun feels like a weight crushing the lungs. Those who fail to respect this knowledge rarely last long. Even the animals know the rules. Camels, often romanticized by outsiders, are valued not for symbolic reasons but for practicality. They can detect distant moisture, endure long periods without drinking, and survive temperatures that would kill other creatures. To desert families, a camel is not simply an animal. It is a partner in survival, a guide, and at times the last hope when all other signs disappear. Life in the Sahara continues, not because conditions are favorable, but because people have adapted to its demands. They understand that water is not merely scarce. It is unstable, shifting, hidden, sometimes cruelly elusive. Every drop gained is a victory. Every successful journey is proof that discipline and knowledge can overcome a landscape designed to erase the unprepared. Generations have lived this way not by conquering the desert, but by respecting it. Their survival is not a story of triumph, but of endurance, patience, and quiet understanding. These are not dramatic tales told for admiration. They are the small, steady truths that keep families alive in a place where life constantly sits on the edge of disappearance. What this chapter reveals is that survival here always begins and ends with the search for water. Beyond this struggle, other choices made by desert families continue to unfold in silence. And somewhere ahead, an unexpected method of staying alive will challenge everything that seems certain. Cacti, desert palms, and hardy acacia trees may appear lifeless to outsiders, but in the Sahara, they are treated as sources of nourishment that stand between survival and collapse. To those who know the land, these plants are not just vegetation scattered across the dunes. They are quiet reservoirs of water, sugar, and strength. Their presence is irregular, sometimes hidden, sometimes misleading, yet generations have learned to approach them with patience and caution. Even something as common as a cactus becomes a calculated opportunity. The exterior thorns, the dry husk, and the tough outer skin tell nothing of the moisture trapped within. Cutting through these layers is slow work, and the result is rarely delicious, but it offers hydration in a place where every drop matters. Many travelers owe their survival to this bitter, pulpy water pulled from a plant that seems almost hostile at first glance. The desert palm, which produces dates, serves a role even more essential. Dates become fuel for journeys, a pocket-sized store of sugar that does not spoil easily and does not attract animals. The taste is familiar and comforting to desert families. But beyond that, dates provide energy that keeps the body moving through hours of relentless heat. The trees themselves are signals that water lies somewhere beneath the sand. They do not grow in places devoid of moisture, which means that finding one is more than a stroke of luck. It is confirmation that life exists nearby. Of all plants in the Sahara, the date palm may be the one most closely tied to human endurance. Acacia trees offer a different kind of sustenance. Their pods contain nutrients that can be ground into food or prepared in simple ways passed down by older generations. Their sap can be used in certain remedies, and their wood burns steadily even in harsh winds. Though the taste of acacia pods is not pleasant, the value they provide has carried communities through dry seasons when no other vegetation could be found. The fact that these trees survive where almost nothing else can makes them partners in endurance, as if they share the same stubborn refusal to yield to the desert. For the Berber people, knowledge of these plants is not optional. It is an inheritance gathered through observation and refined through mistakes that once cost lives. Many plants in the Sahara contain toxins or irritants that cannot be consumed without preparation. Some must be washed. Some must be dried under specific conditions. Others must be sliced thinly and soaked to remove bitter compounds. These techniques are rarely written. They are taught by example, repeated until each generation can identify safe plants with the same confidence as their ancestors. What an outsider might see as a random patch of desert shrubs is to a Berber traveler a catalogue of possibilities, some safe, some dangerous, all requiring careful judgment. The danger is not exaggerated. Several plants in the Sahara can cause illness within hours if consumed improperly. Confusing one species with another might mean the difference between relief and poisoning. Children learn early to observe rather than touch, to memorize shapes, colors, and scents. Their training begins long before they are expected to forage alone. Elders may test them by describing a plant and asking the child to point out the matches in a field. Such lessons are quiet, practical, and essential. They reveal how deeply survival is intertwined with knowledge that outsiders often take for granted. Processing these plants also depends heavily on the scarcity of water. Washing leaves or soaking roots becomes a strategic decision when water supplies are low. This limitation shapes the techniques that families use. Sometimes drying replaces washing. Sometimes the plant is roasted, so toxins evaporate instead of being rinsed away. These decisions are taught not through theory, but through generations of lived experience. The desert does not forgive experimentation. so every method that survives is the result of long histories carried in memory. During long journeys, people gather what little vegetation they find, tying it into small bundles tucked beneath cloth to protect it from sand. Even a handful of edible roots or a few strips of cactus flesh can push a traveler toward the next water source. Vegetation often dictates the pace of travel, determining where groups stop to rest or change direction. In this sense, plants become guides, their presence hinting at the unseen resources that lie beneath the surface. Travelers read them the way others might read signposts. The harshness of the environment shapes attitudes toward these plants. They are not treated with romantic admiration but with sober respect. People never take more than they need, not because of sentiment, but because scarcity makes restraint necessary. A single grove of desert palms may sustain several families during the hottest months. Damaging it could mean damaging one's own future. Even thorny cactus patches difficult to approach and harder to process are approached with care, knowing that they may be the only available hydration for weeks. The desert's plants are unpredictable. Some seasons bring a slight increase in vegetation, while others offer almost nothing. Rainfall determines everything, and rainfall itself is uncertain. Families respond by storing dried dates, prepared acacia pods, and preserved plant matter to bridge the gaps between foraging opportunities. The storage practices used today echo those used by ancestors centuries earlier. The tools, techniques, and habits remain consistent, because in an environment that changes so violently, consistency is a form of safety. Many outsiders assume that survival in the Sahara depends on hunting or on the resilience of animals like camels. While these play important roles, the truth is that desert plants form the quiet foundation of life. They provide hydration when wells fail, nutrition when hunting is impossible, and orientation when the landscape hides water sources beneath the sand. To dismiss them as minor would be to misunderstand the desert entirely. Even the smallest patch of green is meaningful. It signals hope in a landscape that rarely offers comfort. It demonstrates that life persists, not by resisting the desert, but by adapting to it. Those who understand these plants find possibilities where others see emptiness. Those who ignore them often do not survive long enough to learn the truth. These details reveal that edible plants are not conveniences, but lifelines woven directly into desert survival. Beyond this quiet reliance, other strategies practiced by desert families begin to emerge in harsh and unexpected ways. And there is a moment ahead when a method far more dangerous than plants becomes necessary for staying alive. Hunting in the Sahara is never a matter of abundance. It is a matter of finding life in a landscape that hides it carefully. Those who survive here know that animals do not appear often, and when they do, hesitation can mean losing the only source of protein for days. Every movement across the sand must be observed closely. A faint track, a cluster of disturbed grains, or a shadow passing over a dune might signal the presence of a creature capable of sustaining a family. Antelopes, desert hares, and small birds form the core of what the land offers, each one difficult to catch and even harder to approach without revealing intent. Antelopes are the most valuable but also the most cautious. Their senses are sharpened by centuries of survival, and a single misstep sends them sprinting across distances that humans cannot hope to match. Hunters must work quietly and with patience, often watching for hours from behind rocks or low dunes. The hunt is not a display of strength, but a test of discipline. A single arrow or hand-forged dart must be placed with precision, because wasting a shot can mean wasting precious energy. The desert does not reward errors, and the animals that live here mirror that truth. Desert hares require a different approach. They are small, quick, and capable of disappearing beneath scrub before a hunter even lifts a weapon. Their tracks are light, sometimes barely visible. Catching them depends on traps made from simple materials, loops of fiber, narrow pits, or mechanisms triggered by subtle movements. These traps must be checked often, not only to secure the catch, but to prevent the heat from spoiling the meat. Hares do not provide much, but in a place where every bit of protein matters, even a small animal becomes a vital contribution to survival. Birds present yet another challenge. They travel in unpredictable patterns, and their presence above the dunes can vanish as quickly as it appears. Hunters sometimes rely on slings or small bows designed to strike swiftly at short distances. Others lay traps disguised with sand twigs or bits of cloth. Even this minimal approach is a gamble. A day without wind might allow a hunter to hear the rustle of wings. A day with strong gusts can erase all signs of life. The unpredictability of birds makes them valuable when caught, but unreliable as a regular source of food. Tools used in the Sahara reflect necessity rather than sophistication. Knives, bows, and darts are crafted from whatever materials are available: bone, wood, and metal fragments traded from distant markets. These weapons require constant maintenance. The edges dull quickly in the sand, and strings or bindings weaken under the relentless heat. Every hunter maintains a small toolkit, not out of habit, but out of survival. A broken weapon in the desert is more than an inconvenience. It is a threat to the future. Tracking animals requires an understanding of behavior shaped by centuries of observation. Hunters learn to identify when antelopes move toward distant water, when hares hide during the hottest hours, and when birds search for insects caught in patches of vegetation. The knowledge is precise, quiet, and often invisible to outsiders. It is not written down, it is practiced until it becomes instinct. Younger members of the community learn by walking beside older hunters, listening to what is said and what is left unsaid. The desert teaches harsh lessons, and the hunters who endure pass those lessons forward. The act of killing is never treated carelessly. Meat is precious, and families use every part of the animal they take. Bones become tools, skins become coverings, and organs are eaten quickly before the heat spoils them. Nothing is wasted because nothing can be wasted. Even small catches are divided carefully so that every member of the group receives something. This is not generosity, it is structure. Unequal sharing can fracture trust, and the desert is not a place where fractured trust can be afforded. Some hunts require cooperation. A group might encircle an area where animals are known to hide, slowly tightening the ring until the creature has no escape. Such hunts require coordination and silence, as even the slightest sound can disrupt the group's efforts. These moments reveal how survival in the Sahara is rarely individual. It depends on unity, attention, and the shared understanding that food cannot be taken for granted. Danger is present during every hunt. Not from predators, those are rare, but from the landscape itself. A hunter may stray too far, misjudge the distance back to camp, or lose orientation as the sun shifts. Heat exhaustion, dehydration, and disorientation claim more victims than any animal ever has. Hunters know this risk intimately. They calculate how far they can travel, how long they can wait in one place, and how much water they can afford to carry. The hunt is always measured against the greater threat of the desert. When successful, hunting offers relief that lasts only as long as the meat does. The satisfaction is brief, overshadowed by the reality that the search must begin again soon. The Sahara provides just enough to keep people alive, never enough to make them forget the fragility of that life. These details make clear that hunting in the Sahara is not a pursuit, but an endurance shaped by scarcity. Yet beyond these small victories, the routines of desert life grow harsher as people learn to survive with even less comfort. Somewhere within that struggle lies a practice that depends not on the land itself, but on the resilience of an animal far more important than the prey they chase. Camels stand at the center of survival in the Sahara, not as symbols of endurance, but as practical lifelines built into daily life. To those who depend on the desert for existence, a camel is never viewed through the lens of romantic storytelling. It is a resource, a responsibility, and a companion whose resilience determines whether a family travels safely, finds water, or avoids death under the weight of the sun. In a landscape where the environment dismantles all forms of comfort, the camel remains the one creature that helps humans navigate what would otherwise be impassable. The camel's ability to move across long stretches of sand without frequent rest or water is not simply impressive. It is essential. Travelers rely on these animals to carry supplies that would break a human body within hours. Water skins, preserved foods, tools, hides, and even fragments of shelter are balanced on the camel's back with meticulous care. Every item placed there is chosen because it preserves life. Without the camel, these loads would reduce the pace of travel to a crawl, leaving families exposed to heat that can strip the body of moisture in minutes. Beyond transportation, camels provide nourishment. Their milk, warm and slightly salty, carries enough nutrients to keep a person alive when no other food source exists. People drink it fresh when camps lack supplies, and they preserve it through techniques passed down for generations. Even the meat, though consumed less frequently, becomes a rare source of dense protein during difficult seasons. A single camel can sustain a family for a long period, though using one for meat is always a decision made with caution. as it removes a vital partner in future journeys. Camels also lead people to water. Their instincts surpass even the understanding of experienced desert travelers. A camel can sense distant moisture long before a human sees any sign. Its restlessness signals that water may lie ahead. Its refusal to continue suggests that danger or emptiness surrounds the area. In this sense, the camel becomes far more than a tool. It becomes a living instrument for reading the land. Many communities tell stories not about heroic hunters or grand leaders, but about camels who guided families through storms or toward wells that had been forgotten for generations. The bond between humans and camels is built from necessity, not sentimentality. People learn how to care for the animals because failure to do so places both lives at risk. A camel weakened by neglect cannot carry weight, cannot identify distant water, and cannot endure shifting temperatures. Maintaining its strength requires attention, feeding its sparse desert vegetation, checking its hooves, and providing rest during the hottest hours. The care is constant and deliberate. It reflects the simple truth that survival is shared. If the camel fails, the human fails with it. Travel with camels follows a rhythm shaped by knowledge rather than instinct. People guide them through cooler hours of the morning, choosing paths that avoid unstable dunes or areas where predators once roamed. Though predators are rare, the terrain itself is unpredictable. Deep sand can swallow a camel's leg, leading to injuries that endanger the entire group. Sharp rocks hidden beneath loose grains can cut through tough skin. Humans adjust their pace, their load, and their expectations based on how the camel responds to the world around them. The camel's endurance is its most extraordinary quality. It can withstand heat that dries the air to nothing, wind that scours the skin, and long periods without drinking. Its body stores water differently from humans, conserving every bit of moisture through efficient metabolic control. This biological precision allows families to travel distances that would kill an untrained person within hours. Outsiders sometimes mistake this endurance for invincibility, but those who live in the Sahara know that even camels have limits. Pushing one too far can result in sudden collapse, leaving a group stranded with little hope of rescue. In many desert communities, the camel represents stability. It is part of inheritance, part of identity, and part of the rhythm of life that has not changed across centuries. Children learn how to approach camels with calm movements, how to saddle them correctly, and how to read the subtle signs of fatigue or distress. These lessons are not treated as traditions for the sake of tradition. They are survival skills as crucial as finding water or recognizing edible plants. The camel embodies the fragile partnership between people and the environment, a relationship constantly tested by drought, storms, and shifting sands. When storms rise suddenly, camels often provide the only protection from disorientation. Their sense of direction remains steady, even when visibility collapses to nothing. People hold on to the animal's reins, trusting their movements through a world reduced to blowing sand and roaring wind. More than one desert traveler has lived because a camel continued walking towards safety when every human sense failed. Despite their value, camels are not immune to hardship. Long droughts can weaken entire herds. Illnesses spread quickly when food becomes scarce. Families face impossible decisions about which animals to use, which to rest, and when to conserve energy by stopping travel altogether. Every choice comes with consequences, and none are taken lightly. In the Sahara, animals and humans face the same threats, and their destinies remain tightly linked. The camel is not a miracle of nature. It is a creature shaped by the same harsh world that shapes the people who depend on it. Its strength reflects their strength, and its endurance echoes their own struggle to remain alive in a land that offers neither forgiveness nor abundance. To understand the Sahara, one must understand the camel not as a symbol, but as a partner in the quiet, relentless work of survival. All of this reveals that the camel is not merely useful, but essential, carrying both lives and futures across the desert. Far beyond its physical strength, deeper choices emerge when people must stretch every remaining resource to endure the emptiest places. There comes a moment when even the camel's resilience cannot soften what the desert demands next. Date palms stand as some of the few reliable signs of life in the Sahara, offering nourishment where almost nothing else survives. To desert families, these trees mean far more than shade or beauty. They represent a steady source of sugar, fiber, and energy in a landscape defined by scarcity. A single cluster of dates can determine whether a journey continues or ends, whether a camp endures the season or collapses under hunger. The palms rise quietly from patches of sand that hide underground moisture, and their presence is often the first indication that the land still holds something to give. Harvesting dates is a practice shaped by precision and patience. The trees grow tall, their trunks lined with rough patterns left by years of wind and heat. Climbing them requires skill learned early in life, with movements that must be confident yet cautious. A slip from such a height can be fatal, and no community can afford the loss of a capable forager. Men and sometimes older boys wrap their hands with cloth, grip the trunk, and ascend steadily. From the ground, the climb appears simple, but every step demands strength, balance, and trust in the tree beneath them. Once reaching the fronds, the harvester works carefully to cut clusters of dates without damaging the branches. A broken limb can affect future harvests, and food in the desert is never treated recklessly. The dates themselves vary in color and ripeness, golden brown or darkened by long exposure to the sun. Some fall easily into waiting baskets, others cling stubbornly and must be coaxed free. Each cluster collected represents time, protection, and endurance that the trees quietly accumulate through the seasons. Fresh dates offer immediate relief to travelers in camps. Their sweetness provides quick energy, and their moisture helps ease the dryness that settles in the throat after hours in the heat. But eating them fresh is a short-lived luxury. Most dates are preserved for the months ahead, when storms or drought may cut off all other food sources. Drying techniques are simple yet effective. Families spread dates across woven mats, allowing the sun to draw out excess moisture. Over several days, the fruit shrinks slightly, becoming dense and concentrated. Once dried, dates resist spoilage and can be stored for long periods without attracting insects. Storage is as important as harvesting. Dried dates are placed in leather bags or sealed containers designed to keep out sand and moisture. The bags are carefully tied and hung away from the ground. Every household knows exactly how much they have, how long it must last, and how much can be spared for travelers or trade. The dates become a form of wealth, especially during harsh seasons when vegetation disappears entirely. A family with a large store of dried dates holds security that others may envy. Date palms also signal where water may lie beneath the ground. Families use the trees to judge where to dig new wells or where to camp temporarily. The palms survive only where their roots reach moisture, making them natural guides in a land that hides its resources carefully. This relationship between plant and human is not mystical but practical, born from generations of observation. Many wells exist because someone noticed a line of palms standing persistently along a ridge or cluster of sand. The value of dates extends beyond direct consumption. Their pits can be ground and added to animal feed. Their fibers can be woven into ropes or used as fuel. Even the fronds that fall during harvest season become useful as a makeshift shelter or bedding. Nothing is wasted from the tree because nothing in the Sahara allows for waste. Communities organize their lives around the harvest times. During the ripest weeks, camps become busy with activity. Children gather fallen dates, women sort and clean them, and elders oversee drying and storage. The atmosphere carries a rare sense of abundance, one of the few moments when people can imagine the possibility of comfort, yet even this abundance is tempered by awareness. Everyone knows that storms, drought, and shifting sands will eventually return the land to its harsh stillness. Trade routes also depend on dates. Travelers and merchants moving across vast distances rely on dried dates as portable fuel. A handful can sustain them through long hours without stopping, and the fruit requires no preparation. This convenience makes dates one of the most valued goods exchanged between desert communities. A well-managed grove can support not only a single camp, but an entire network of people stretched across distant dunes. Despite this importance, maintaining date palms is never simple. Sudden temperature shifts, unexpected cold nights, or insect swarms can threaten entire harvests. During such periods, families watch the trees anxiously, knowing that losing even one season of dates could bring hunger to their doorstep. The trees require little water but depend heavily on stability, something the Sahara rarely provides. The relationship between people and date palms reveals a larger truth about life in the desert. Survival depends not on dramatic acts but on quiet routines carried out with care. It is the patience to climb a tree safely, the discipline to dry fruit properly, the foresight to store it carefully, and the humility to take only what is needed. The desert offers no room for complacency. Yet in the shade of a date palm, people find a moment of calm that borders on gratitude. All of this shows that the date palm is not a luxury but a lifeline woven into every season of desert life. Beyond this dependable sweetness, deeper challenges arise, as families learn to preserve food for journeys that test their endurance even further. At a certain point, scarcity demands methods far more severe than harvesting fruit. Dried food stands at the center of long-distance survival in the Sahara, serving as the quiet foundation that allows families and travelers to cross stretches of land where nothing edible grows. In a place where the heat strips moisture from everything it touches, and the nights erase any sense of security, dried provisions must be reliable, lightweight, and dense with energy. The preparation of these foods is not ceremonial or celebratory. It is routine shaped by necessity and sharpened by generations who understood that a single miscalculation could mean starvation far from help. Meat is often preserved first taken from animals caught or slaughtered during rare moments of abundance. Strips are cut thin, rubbed with salt if any is available, and hung in the sun until they lose nearly all moisture. The resulting jerky is tough, dry, and far from pleasant, yet it remains edible for weeks or even months. Its value lies not in flavor, but in durability. Travelers carry these strips wrapped in cloth or hidden within pouches of leather, protected from sand and heat. A small piece chewed slowly can provide enough sustenance to keep the body moving during long hours when no fresh food can be found. Dried fruit, most commonly dates, adds a sweetness that balances the otherwise harsh diet. After being laid out on woven mats and left beneath the desert sun, the fruit hardens into dense, concentrated pieces that resist spoilage. These dried dates are not luxuries. They are measured fuel, consumed sparingly, and stored meticulously. Families teach their children to treat each dried piece as a fragment of life, not something to be eaten thoughtlessly. The fruit's sugar and fiber provide a steady release of energy, allowing travelers to walk for miles without the sharp fatigue that often accompanies heat and hunger. Another staple is the thick, heavy bread prepared in advance of travel. The dough is simple flour, water, and salt when available, but the method of cooking varies between communities. Some flatten the dough and bake it on hot stones. Others bury it beneath sand, heated by fire until it becomes dense and dry. These breads do not crumble easily and do not attract insects, making them ideal for storage. While their taste is plain, their purpose is stability. Even a small piece, eaten with dried meat or fruit, can sustain a person long enough to reach the next source of water. The process of storing all these foods is governed by caution rather than abundance. Before each journey, families gather supplies and assess how far the group must travel, how many days the crossing might take, and how much they can realistically carry without exhausting themselves or their animals. Everything is counted, wrapped, and arranged so that nothing is wasted and nothing spoils prematurely. A traveler who misjudges these provisions risks more than hunger. They risk being unable to continue at all. Sand is the constant enemy of stored food. It slips beneath wrappings, clings to surfaces, and infiltrates even the smallest gaps. To protect against this, food is sealed within layers of leather cloth or woven fibers designed to keep out grit. Bags are tied tightly and hung whenever possible, kept away from areas where wind can scatter sand into every crevice. Families learn to open and close containers quickly, minimizing exposure to airborne dust. These practices appear repetitive, but repetition is exactly what keeps people alive. Caravans often adjust their pace based on available food. Too much weight slows camels and increases the strain on travelers. Too little food places the group in constant danger. The balance is delicate, and experience is required to maintain it. Older travelers recall journeys where miscalculations forced groups to ration every bite, reducing meals to small fragments barely larger than a thumb. Such memories are not told dramatically. They are told to teach caution. During travel, meals are small, silent affairs. People sit briefly, dividing what they have, with an attention to fairness that reflects the seriousness of their situation. Eating too much at once is discouraged, as the body may struggle to conserve water afterward. Instead, food is consumed in careful intervals, allowing travelers to maintain steady strength over long distances. There is no indulgence, only calculation. Dried provisions also serve as trade goods when travelers encounter other groups. A few strips of dried meat, a bundle of hardened dates, or a thick loaf of travel bread can be exchanged for watercloth or assistance in navigating unfamiliar terrain. These trades occur quietly, built on mutual understanding. Everyone who crosses the desert knows the value of food that will not spoil. Beyond their physical uses, dried foods provide something intangible: predictability. In a land where storms erase landmarks and the heat shifts from bearable to lethal within minutes. Having food that does not fail offers rare stability. It allows travelers to focus on finding water, reading the land, and guiding their animals, without worrying that their supplies will betray them. No matter how harsh the journey becomes, these provisions remain steady. They do not wilt, spoil, or demand immediate consumption. They simply endure, much like the people who rely on them. All of this reveals that dried food is not a convenience, but the backbone that allows any crossing of the Sahara to begin at all. Beyond this fragile stability, harsher realities emerge as water and food must be divided with a discipline that leaves no room for sentiment. In time, rationing becomes a test of will rather than hunger. Rationing in the Sahara is not a rule born from preference, but a structure carved out of necessity. Every group that travels across the desert learns quickly that food and water must be measured with unwavering precision. There is no margin for generosity, no room for spontaneous indulgence. The environment strips away illusions of abundance, leaving behind the reality that survival depends entirely on how carefully each portion is divided. Long before families take their first step into open sand, the rationing system has already shaped their expectations, behaviors, and hopes for the journey ahead. Water receives the strictest attention. Each drop is monitored, counted, and distributed according to a plan agreed upon before travel begins. People gather around containers not to quench their thirst freely, but to take carefully measured sips. The sound of water pouring, however small, draws silent focus from everyone nearby. It is not uncommon for travelers to hold their breath as the containers open, aware of how easily even a slight spill can undermine days of discipline. The act of drinking becomes deliberate, almost restrained, as though respect for water must be shown through control rather than gratitude. Food follows a similar structure. Dried meat, hardened bread, and preserved dates are divided into daily portions that rarely change. Each piece is sized according to what the body needs to continue walking, not what it craves. Meals are never eaten to fullness. They are eaten to maintain function. Families sit briefly to share what they have, distributing portions with the steadiness of people who understand that one miscalculation, one day of consuming too much, can collapse the entire journey. In this system, hunger is not eliminated. It is managed. Rationing extends beyond basic survival. It reinforces social responsibility within the group. The elderly, whose experience guides the journey, receive enough to remain clear-minded. Children whose bodies weaken quickly under heat are protected as much as possible. These decisions are not explained through sentimentality but through logic. A group cannot afford to lose the knowledge carried by older travelers, nor can it risk watching a child fall ill and slow the pace of the entire caravan. In the Sahara, compassion and practicality often merge into the same action. The fairness of rationing is closely guarded. Disputes rarely erupt openly, but suspicion can settle heavily over a group if someone appears to receive more than their share. No one is exempt from scrutiny. Even leaders must show their portions openly to maintain trust. The desert magnifies every imbalance, transforming minor inequalities into potential dangers. A group that mistrusts itself is a group that will not endure the distance. For this reason, transparency becomes as vital as the rations themselves. During long days of travel, the psychological strain of rationing begins to shape the rhythm of life. People grow accustomed to ignoring thirst until the exact moment designated for drinking. They learn to chew slowly, stretching small amounts of food over long periods. Silence becomes part of the routine, not because people have nothing to say, but because conserving energy feels more urgent than conversation. The body adjusts, accepting that discomfort is constant, while the mind adapts to the reality that desires must be postponed indefinitely. There are moments when the system is tested. Unexpected heat illness or storms can force groups to reconsider their portions. Decisions must be made quickly. Reducing rations risks weakening the entire caravan. Increasing them risks running out before reaching the next water source. These choices weigh heavily on whoever must voice them. A wrong decision can doom everyone, and the desert does not offer second chances. Even in such emergencies, the guiding principle remains unchanged. Survival depends on restraint. Rationing also influences how groups perceive distance. Journeys are measured not only in miles but in meals. Travelers think in terms of how many days of food remain, how many water stops are expected, and how many sips will be available at each sunrise. The landscape becomes a series of calculations rather than an expanse of sand. This constant awareness keeps people grounded, focused, and prepared for the inevitable unpredictability of the Sahara. Within camps, Rationing takes on a quieter form. Families store food in sealed containers, opening them only at designated times. Children are taught early not to touch these supplies without permission, and the seriousness of the rule leaves a lasting impression. These habits continue even outside the desert. For those shaped by Sahara, travel managing resources becomes a lifelong instinct. Despite the severity of rationing, it also creates a form of unity. People who share limited supplies learn to recognize the needs of those around them with unusual clarity. A traveler who falls behind is given a careful portion to keep them moving. Someone who grows ill is supported not through excess, but through strategic redistribution. The system may seem harsh, yet it ensures that the group moves as one body, each part dependent on the others. Rationing is not a punishment. It is a structure that transforms scarcity into endurance. Without it, even the strongest traveler would falter long before the journey's end. These details reveal that rationing is not discipline for its own sake, but the foundation that prevents collapse in the face of extreme scarcity. Beyond this careful division, deeper reliance on preserved supplies emerges as communities search for methods to extend food even further. In the harshest periods, people turn to strategies that bind entire groups together in ways they would never choose under gentler conditions. Salt occupies a place of rare importance in the Sahara, serving as both a preservative and a safeguard against hunger, in a land where fresh food disappears almost as quickly as it is found. Long before travelers begin their journeys, communities gather salt with an understanding that it represents time protection and survival. The substance seems simple: white crystals scraped from desert flats or traded along caravan routes, but its role shapes how people store food, prepare for drought, and support one another through long, harsh seasons. When meat is available, especially after a successful hunt or the slaughter of an animal that can no longer travel, the presence of salt determines how long that food will last. Without it, meat spoils in hours beneath the desert heat. With it, strips of flesh can endure for weeks or months. Families cut the meat into thin lengths, pressing salt into every surface. The crystals draw out moisture, tightening the fibers and preventing rot. This salted meat is then laid across rocks, suspended from wooden frames, or hung from the branches of hardy desert shrubs. The sun finishes the work, transforming what was once perishable into something resilient. Fish, rare but sometimes obtained near oases or traded from distant regions, undergo the same treatment. Salt allows these delicate proteins to withstand temperatures that would otherwise destroy them. Once preserved, the fish becomes fibrous and intense in flavor, but its strength lies in durability, not taste. A few bites can sustain a traveler through long hours of walking, giving energy in a form that will not degrade. Communities often prepare salted meat as a group. This is not only practical: preserving large quantities is easier with many hands, but also social. Families gather around wide mats spread on the ground, each person handling a different step, cleaning the meat, applying salt, and arranging the strips for drying. The work is rhythmic and precise. Even children participate, learning early the importance of pressing salt evenly, ensuring no part is left untreated. Their small hands follow the guidance of elders who speak quietly about past seasons when mistakes cost lives. Salt itself is treated with the respect given to valuable goods. Containers are sealed tightly to protect them from sand and moisture. People measure it, carefully aware that using too much leaves little for future needs, while using too little risks spoilage. A balance must always be maintained, and this balance shapes the decisions of an entire community. There are times when groups debate openly about how much salt can be spared for a particular batch of meat. These discussions are never trivial. They determine whether the food will sustain the group or fail them when conditions worsen. The act of storing salted food mirrors the discipline of rationing. Strips of meat are wrapped securely in leather or cloth, kept away from areas where insects and sand might gather. Storage marks are sometimes carved into wooden containers, indicating when the food was preserved and how long it should last. Travelers preparing for a long crossing calculate exactly how much salted meat they need, knowing that its reliability can decide whether they complete the journey. Salt does more than preserve food; it preserves time. By slowing decay, it allows people to stretch moments of abundance into months of security. A single salted haul can carry a family through a drought, a dust storm, or a period when no animals pass near their hunting grounds. This ability to hold on to nourishment creates a buffer against the unpredictability of the desert, giving people room to plan, rest, or travel without being driven by desperation. Because of this, salt becomes a form of currency. Traders carry it across vast distances, exchanging it for cloth tools, dried fruit, or livestock. A community with ample salt holds power. A community without it is vulnerable. When caravans arrive, salt is among the most coveted goods, often stored in heavy blocks that glimmer faintly beneath desert light. These blocks represent security in its most tangible form. Yet salt is not limitless. There are seasons when supplies run low, forcing families to reconsider how they preserve their food. During such times, every grain is treasured. The slightest spill feels like a loss far greater than its size. People handle salt with the same caution they apply to water, understanding that mismanagement affects everyone. In rare emergencies, families may open containers of salt reserved for trade, sacrificing economic stability for physical survival. Despite its importance, the taste of salted food is rarely considered pleasant. The meat becomes tough, the fish almost brittle, but flavor has never been the point. The purpose of salt is endurance. It transforms fragile resources into stable ones and turns moments of opportunity into long-term security. Its presence allows travelers to move beyond the boundaries of immediate hunger and confront the desert with a measure of confidence. Communities have long understood that survival in the Sahara depends not only on finding food, but on preserving it effectively. Salt stands at the center of this logic, shaping how people prepare for the unknown and how they protect themselves from the desert's relentless unpredictability. These details show that salt is not simply an ingredient, but a barrier between stability and collapse in a land where fresh food dies in the heat. Beyond this layer of protection, life in the Sahara demands strategic settlement around rare resources that offer nourishment, shade, and relief. Under that shifting sun, communities learn that survival is never solitary. It gathers around places that promise more than emptiness. Oases and ancient wells form the rare points of permanence in the Sahara, shaping where people settle, where caravans pause, and where life gathers despite the desert's harshness. These places stand in quiet contrast to the surrounding emptiness pockets of green water and movement in a land otherwise defined by silence. Every family traveler and trader knows that proximity to an oasis means stability, while distance from one means dependence on luck, memory, and rationing. The power of these sites comes not from abundance, but from being the only dependable sources in a landscape that offers so little. An oasis is never discovered casually. Families often spend generations in the same region, learning how underground springs shift how the land changes after storms, and how to determine whether a well still holds water. Some wells have been maintained for centuries, dug by hands long gone but preserved because the need for water outlives all who depend on it. Approaching one is always done with caution. The first sign may be a cluster of date palms, the faint sound of insects, or the softness of soil beneath the sand. Reaching such a place feels like arriving at a border between two worlds, the unforgiving expanses behind, and a brief reprieve ahead. Once settled near an oasis, people begin to cultivate the limited land available. Small plots are marked carefully to avoid draining the water table. Vegetables such as onions or leafy greens grow in narrow beds. These gardens are not lush by any ordinary standard, yet they represent a surprising triumph over the environment. Families tend them at dawn and dusk, avoiding the intense heat of midday. They work with patience, coaxing life from soil that would remain barren without the nearby water. Goats are often raised around these settlements, thriving on sparse vegetation and needing relatively little water. They provide milk, meat, and occasional trade goods. Their presence adds a layer of security, creating a steady food source that supplements the dried meat and preserved stores that travelers rely on. Watching goats navigate the uneven terrain around an oasis reinforces how deeply adapted both animals and people must be to survive here. Despite the seeming tranquility of these places, control over an oasis carries weight. Communities protect them carefully, establishing unwritten rules about access and usage. Water cannot be wasted. Gardens must be maintained responsibly. Travelers may rest and refill their containers, but they do not overstay or disrupt the balance. A dispute over access can escalate quickly not because of aggression, but because survival depends so heavily on fairness and respect. Whoever manages an oasis effectively ensures the longevity of the community. Whoever mismanages it risks weakening everyone. The rhythm of life around an oasis follows cycles shaped by seasons and necessity. Early mornings are filled with purposeful movement, drawing water from the well, feeding animals, checking the gardens, and preparing for tasks that must be completed before the sun rises too high. Afternoons are quieter, with people seeking shade beneath palms or beside mud walls built to channel breezes. As evening approaches, activity returns. Meals are prepared, containers refilled, and tools repaired for the next day. This rhythm builds a sense of stability that stands in stark contrast to the unpredictability of desert travel. Oases also become natural gathering points for trade. Caravans crossing vast distances depend on these spots to rest, replenish water supplies, and exchange goods. Salt dates, cloth tools, and dried food all pass through these temporary markets. Families living near the oasis benefit from the contact, gaining news of faraway regions and opportunities to trade what they have painstakingly grown or preserved. These exchanges strengthen ties between distant communities, creating informal networks of support in an otherwise isolated world. Ancient wells play a similar role. Some lie far from any settlement, maintained only because travelers depend on them during long crossings. These wells require constant care. Sand fills them easily. Debris collects after storms and walls weaken over time. Families or groups often take responsibility for specific wells, visiting them annually to clear and repair them. Such labor is exhausting but essential. A neglected well can become useless, jeopardizing the lives of anyone who planned their journey around its existence. Living near an oasis does not eliminate hardship. Water levels fluctuate, gardens fail, animals fall ill, sandstorms bury pathways and reshape the land, forcing families to adapt again and again. Yet even with these challenges, life anchored to an oasis remains far more secure than the life of constant movement faced by nomadic groups. The ability to grow food, raise animals, and maintain steady water access creates a form of resilience unmatched in the open desert. To those who survive here, the oasis is not a paradise. It is a negotiation, a delicate arrangement between people, and an environment that never stops demanding effort. The water must be protected, the land must be respected, and the community must function with discipline that mirrors the rationing and preservation practices used on the move. Every action is shaped by awareness that losing an oasis means returning to a life entirely dependent on the uncertain generosity of the land. All of this reveals that an oasis is not merely a resting point, but a fragile anchor where life, food, and water gather in uneasy balance. Beyond this stability, survival still depends on connecting with the wider desert through exchange and cooperation with distant travelers. In that movement, people discover that endurance comes not only from resources, but from relationships formed across shifting sand. Trade between desert communities and passing caravans forms one of the most essential lifelines in the Sahara, linking isolated settlements with distant regions through an exchange of goods, knowledge, and survival itself. No group, no matter how self-reliant, possesses everything it needs. The desert strips resources down to their bones, forcing people to depend on others who cross the sands with supplies gathered from far beyond the dunes. These encounters are never casual. They are moments shaped by necessity, caution, and the understanding that every trade influences whether families will endure the coming weeks. Caravans approach slowly, their lines of camels appearing first as shifting silhouettes against the heat. Dust trails rise behind them, revealing the scale of the journey they have endured. Local families watch carefully from a distance, assessing the size of the group, the nature of the cargo, and the intentions of the travelers. Trust in the desert is deliberate. A caravan may bring opportunity, but it may also bring risk. Too many people drawing from a single water source, or too many animals trampling fragile grazing areas. Approaching each other requires calm, respect, and awareness that neither side can afford conflict. Once the caravan reaches the settlement or oasis, trade begins in a quiet, measured rhythm. Goods are laid out on woven mats or in open baskets, salt shaped into uneven blocks, animal hides cleaned and prepared for use, bundles of dried herbs, small amounts of grain, leatherwork, and hand-forged tools. Travelers bring their own offerings, dates from distant groves, fresh cloth, new blades, cured meat, pottery, and rare spices. Some even carry medicinal plants from faraway mountain regions, valued for their ability to treat illnesses that local remedies cannot touch. The logic of trade is simple, but unwavering. Each side offers what the harshness of their region allows them to produce. Communities near oases often have dried dates, vegetables, herbs, and carefully tanned skins. Nomadic groups farther from water specialize in dyed cloth animal products or salt harvested from vast flats. Long-distance caravans bring items neither group could ever produce alone. The exchange, though modest by outside standards, forms the backbone of survival. Food is often the most sought-after resource. A family that has endured a failed harvest, a collapsed well, or a disease among livestock turns to caravans with the hope of securing enough provisions to bridge the gap until conditions improve. Dried meat, grain, and even small amounts of fresh produce become treasures worth bartering. Those who live permanently near an oasis must also rely on trade for the narrow space and limited water supply to prevent them from producing all they need. Every handful of grain or strip of cured meat acquired from travelers represents another day of security. Salt plays a central role in these exchanges. Its ability to preserve meat makes it invaluable to caravans undertaking long distances across barren stretches. Local communities may trade heavy blocks of salt for food they cannot otherwise obtain. In turn, travelers carry the salt to new regions, where it becomes part of a much larger network of exchange. The value of salt stretches far beyond its immediate use. It becomes a signal of stability and preparation. Herbs and medicinal plants are equally important. Some desert plants contain compounds that treat infections, soothe stomach illnesses, or ease fever, the kinds of conditions made worse by heat, dust, and exhaustion. When travelers recognize the quality of a certain herb bundle, they may trade generously, knowing how rare and necessary such remedies are during long crossings. These exchanges also allow knowledge to move between groups as people discuss how to prepare, brew, or store the plants for travel. The act of trading is accompanied by conversation that holds its own value. Travelers share news of other oases, the condition of distant wells, recent storms, and the movement of other caravans. Such information shapes decisions about when to travel, which paths to avoid, and how to prepare for upcoming challenges. The desert hides danger easily. News passed hand to hand becomes another form of protection. But trade also demands restraint. Communities cannot offer more than their limits allow, and caravans cannot carry more than their animals can shoulder. Every exchange is a negotiation with survival, not a pursuit of profit. People speak plainly, weigh goods in their hands, and calculate carefully what their families will need in the coming weeks. There is no place here for extravagance. Every item traded has a purpose, and every purpose is tied to endurance. Despite the simplicity of these transactions, the emotional weight is significant. A community grateful for the arrival of a caravan may feel a brief sense of relief, knowing that new supplies will stabilize their days. Travelers who have crossed empty, hostile expanses feel equally relieved to rest near water and share food that was prepared with the help of others. Trade binds them together, creating relationships that can last across generations. The desert tolerates no isolation. Every group depends on others, even when miles apart. Through trade communities, preserve not only food, but connection. A quiet assurance that they are part of a network reaching far beyond the dunes. These details show that trade is not a luxury, but a shared lifeline that turns distant travelers into partners in survival. Beyond this cooperation, food preparation returns to simplicity, shaped by the relentless heat and the limited tools families carry. Soon, nourishment will rely on methods that require nothing but stones, fire, and patience. Cooking in the Sahara rarely resembles cooking as most people imagine it. No metal pots are resting over controlled flames, no pans to hold ingredients, and no enclosed kitchens to shield the process from wind and drifting sand. Food preparation here is stripped down to its most essential form, shaped entirely by what the desert provides: firestones and patience. In a place where survival depends on resourcefulness, people learn to transform the environment itself into a workable kitchen, adjusting their techniques to conditions that shift with each sunrise. Flat stones play a central role. Families search for slabs that have been heated naturally by the sun, or that can withstand the intensity of a controlled fire. These stones become makeshift cooking surfaces, warmed until they radiate heat evenly. The desert sun alone can bring them to temperatures high enough to cook thin slices of meat, softening fibers that would otherwise be too tough to chew. When fire is added, the stones become even more effective, turning into stable platforms that hold food without letting sand contaminate it. In the absence of pots, ingredients are placed directly onto these stones. Meat is laid in thin strips across the surface, each piece sizzling quietly as it reacts to the heat. Vegetables, rare but valuable, are roasted slowly, absorbing smoke and warmth while retaining whatever moisture they naturally hold. Those who prepare food this way develop an instinct for timing, learning to read the color and sound of cooking rather than relying on tools. It is a process that rewards patience, rushing risks, burning precious food, or undercooking pieces that are already limited in quantity. Another method relies on embers. After a fire has burned down to glowing coals, ingredients can be wrapped in leaves or cloth and buried beneath the warm ash. The heat cooks the food gradually, infusing it with a smoky flavor while protecting it from direct contact with flame or grit. This method is especially useful for tougher meats or for preserving moisture. Travelers develop skill in shaping the ash bed, ensuring even heat distribution and preventing wind from disrupting the process. Cooking beneath coals is slow, but slowness is often the only available option in a place where nothing grows quickly and nothing improves with impatience. Sometimes the ground itself becomes the cooking surface. After sunlight has baked the sand for hours, temperatures can rise high enough to warm small parcels of food wrapped securely. This technique is modest in its effect, more warming than cooking, but it demonstrates how deeply connected survival is to the rhythms of the desert. People who live here grow accustomed to reading the land in subtle ways, understanding when the sand holds enough retained heat to prepare something safely. Even this minimal method can make a difference during long journeys, when supplies are few and fires cannot be built. These cooking practices arise not from preference but from environmental demand. Wood for fires is scarce and must be conserved carefully. Stones crack under extreme temperature swings, forcing people to handle them with care. Wind shifts, constantly threatening to scatter embers or blow sand onto food at any moment. Every step of the process requires attention not because the food must be perfect, but because waste is unacceptable. Losing even a small portion of a meal to impatience or error can weaken a traveler during the next stretch of distance. Meals prepared this way are simple, but they provide stability. The act of cooking becomes a moment of order within the unpredictability of the desert. Families gather around the fire or cooking stones, sharing the limited warmth and watching the food transform under the heat. The smell of roasted meat or warmed bread offers brief comfort in a place where comfort is rarely available. Even the smallest meal prepared with care reinforces the sense that survival remains possible. For those traveling across the desert, cooking techniques must be portable. People carry a few essential tools, flint, small knives, and cloths for wrapping food, but rely primarily on what they find along the way. Stones must be selected, firewood must be gathered from sparse shrubs, and cooking locations must be chosen to shield flames from wind. This adaptability defines how desert communities function. They cannot depend on consistent conditions, so they develop skills that can adjust to any environment the Sahara imposes. Despite the harshness of this lifestyle, cooking retains cultural meaning. Recipes are passed quietly between generations, shaped not by ingredients, but by method. Elders teach children how to judge the right moment to turn meat on a stone, how to arrange coals for slow cooking, and how to choose leaves that will not burn too quickly. These practices form a link to ancestors who survived the same conditions, using the same techniques long before modern tools existed. Cooking in the Sahara is proof that survival depends on more than finding food. It relies on the ability to make that food edible with almost nothing. The desert provides few tools, yet those who understand it learn to turn heat, stone, and fire into a functional kitchen that reflects both necessity and resilience. These details show that cooking in the Sahara is not a craft, but an adaptation shaped entirely by what the land allows. Beyond this resourceful simplicity, survival begins to hinge on how the body responds to heat and hunger under relentless sun. Before long, eating becomes less a comfort and more a strategic act meant to avoid danger rather than enjoy nourishment. Eating lightly in the Sahara is less a choice than a biological strategy shaped by harsh conditions. Travelers and nomadic families know that the body reacts differently under extreme heat. Every meal demands energy to digest, and every step of digestion produces internal warmth that can become dangerous when the sun is already pressing against the skin with relentless force. The desert teaches people gently or brutally that survival depends on controlling what enters the stomach just as much as controlling water and movement. Large meals are avoided because they place immediate strain on the body. Digestion requires water, and in the desert, water is always limited. A heavy meal can leave a person feeling sluggish, overheated, and thirsty far sooner than expected. The weight of food in the stomach amplifies fatigue, making each step through the dunes feel heavier than the last. Those who ignore this rule learn quickly that overeating is not a sign of strength, but a risk, one that leads to dizziness, dehydration, or collapse. Instead, meals are broken into small, steady portions eaten throughout the day. Travelers may nibble on a piece of dried meat, take a few bites of dense bread, or chew slowly on a dried date to maintain energy without overwhelming the body. This controlled rhythm helps keep internal heat stable. Rather than forcing the body to wrestle with digestion all at once, small amounts of food allow it to function without drawing excessively from precious water reserves. Even children learn this pattern early, taught that hunger in the desert must be understood differently than hunger elsewhere. Heat influences everything. During midday, when the sun stands directly overhead and temperatures rise to their most intense, eating is often avoided entirely. People rest in shade, conserve strength, and wait for the air to cool slightly before consuming anything substantial. The body's natural thirst during this time is already difficult to manage. Adding digestion to the strain could tip the balance toward danger. In this environment, restraint becomes a core survival instinct. Nomadic groups refine this practice over generations. They learn to listen to their bodies, recognizing subtle signs of stress long before symptoms become serious. A tightening of the throat, too much dryness on the tongue, or a lingering sense of warmth after eating signals that the body needs less food, not more. Experience teaches them that the desert punishes impulsive choices. Those who thrive are those who eat modestly, move steadily, and respect the limits imposed by heat and distance. The psychology of eating also changes. Food is not viewed as comfort or indulgence, but as fuel, calculated precisely to match the body's needs. Travelers treat each piece of stored food deliberately aware of how quickly supplies disappear if eaten without restraint. Meals do not revolve around satisfying hunger fully, but around maintaining the minimum strength required to continue. The satisfaction that comes from feeling full is replaced by the quiet reassurance that the body remains balanced and capable of enduring another day. Despite these limitations, eating lightly does not mean eating poorly. People choose foods that deliver dense energy in small amounts. Dried meat with concentrated protein dates, filled with natural sugars, and flat breads that digest slowly and release energy over hours. These foods fit the rhythm of desert travel, supporting the body without destabilizing it. The discipline behind eating them repeatedly day after day becomes part of the traveler's identity, a sign of readiness to face unpredictable terrain, shifting winds and long distances. Travelers also consider how eating affects sweating. Heavy meals increase internal temperature, encouraging the body to release heat through sweat. But sweating in the desert can be dangerous. Every drop lost must be replaced, and water supplies may not allow for it. Eating lightly reduces the need for sweating, and therefore reduces water loss. This balance between food intake and bodily response is understood intuitively by those who spend years crossing the desert. They learn that the best way to protect themselves is not through abundance, but through moderation. Even during temporary stays at oases, where shade and water create brief comfort, the habit of eating lightly persists. People may enjoy slightly larger meals, but they rarely abandon the discipline honed on the open sand. For them, the feeling of heaviness, after eating too much, is a reminder of how fragile the body becomes when burdened with unnecessary strain. The desert is never far away, and its lessons never lose importance. Small meals also support a steady pace of movement. Instead of cycles of fullness and fatigue, the body remains consistent. Travelers who follow this pattern avoid the sudden drops in energy that can slow or endanger a group. Their minds stay clearer, their steps more predictable, and their resilience stronger. These advantages matter when distances stretch across days with no guarantee of water or rest. Ultimately, eating lightly reflects a deeper truth. Survival in the Sahara depends on respecting natural limits. The desert demands efficiency, and those who live within its boundaries learn to adjust their habits until they align with its unforgiving rhythm. These details reveal that eating lightly is not deprivation, but adaptation, reducing internal strain so the body can withstand the desert's heat. Beyond this careful balance, travelers depend on stored liquids that serve as both hydration and protection against illness. As conditions grow harsher, even a small sip of the right drink can determine who continues and who collapses. Fermented drinks hold a quiet but vital place in Sahara, survival offering hydration and protection when clean water is scarce or unreliable. Among these, lightly fermented camel milk stands out as one of the most dependable options. Communities that rely on camels have developed a deep understanding of how milk behaves in extreme heat and how fermentation transforms it into something safer, more stable, and more nourishing than fresh water alone. In a landscape where illness can spread quickly and dehydration arrives without warning, a single mouthful of fermented milk becomes more than a drink. It becomes a safeguard. Fresh camel milk is already rich, carrying fat and moisture that helps soothe the throat after hours of dry wind. But fresh milk spoils quickly under desert temperatures. Fermentation slows this decline, stabilizing the liquid and making it safer to store for longer periods. People pour the milk into leather bags or clay containers, allowing it to rest in shaded areas where natural bacteria alter its flavor and texture. The result is a sour, slightly thickened drink with a sharp edge that both refreshes and strengthens the body. This transformation is subtle, but its importance is immense. Fermentation reduces harmful microbes and supports digestion. In regions where water sources vary in quality, fermented milk becomes a trusted alternative that reduces the risk of stomach illness, something that can weaken a traveler enough to threaten their survival. Even children learn early that the sour taste, though unexpected at first, signals a drink that can carry them through days when water must be rationed carefully. Travelers often carry small amounts of fermented milk in tightly sealed pouches. They drink sparingly, taking slow sips rather than large gulps. Each sip cools the mouth, coats the throat, and provides energy without overwhelming the stomach. Unlike plain water, fermented milk digests gradually, offering a more sustained sense of hydration. For this reason, many seasoned desert wanderers rely on it during long stretches between oases, trusting the drink's ability to steady their energy while limiting water loss. The preparation of fermented milk is a communal task. Women often monitor the process, checking the containers throughout the day to judge how far fermentation has progressed. Temperature, shade, and the quality of the container all influence the final product. Families develop their own methods, passed down quietly across generations, each shaped by subtle variations in climate, location, and tradition. These small adaptations accumulate into a body of knowledge that guides entire communities. Consistency matters. A drink fermented too long becomes too sour to consume easily. A drink fermented too little may spoil in the heat. The balance must be exact, and achieving it requires patience. People learn to observe the way the liquid shifts when swirled, the smell it gives off at different stages, and the slight changes in texture that signal readiness. These details are not written down. They are memorized, lived, and refined through practice. Fermented milk also plays a role in maintaining strength during illness. When someone shows signs of dehydration, loose stools, or stomach discomfort, elders often recommend the drink as a first response. Its natural acidity helps stabilize digestion, and its nutrients replenish what the body loses in the heat. In environments where modern medicine is distant or unavailable, such remedies become essential, offering relief without draining limited resources. During long migrations, lightly fermented milk becomes part of the daily rhythm. Travelers drink small portions at dawn before the sun grows harsh. Later in the day, when heat presses hardest, they rely on the drink's lingering moisture to keep their bodies balanced despite reduced water intake. At night, the remaining milk is checked, stirred, or poured into new containers, depending on how far along it has fermented. These routines are as important as managing food or navigating dunes. Fermented drinks also function as trade goods. Caravans moving across the desert often seek them, knowing the value of a safe, nourishing liquid that withstands heat better than water alone. Families near oases prepare extra batches when possible, using the trade to acquire grain, dried fish, herbs, or tools. These exchanges strengthen ties between communities and travelers, creating networks of support that extend far beyond the reach of any single settlement. Despite their usefulness, fermented drinks carry a certain austerity. They are not consumed for pleasure, but for necessity. Their sharp flavor does not comfort the senses. It reinforces awareness of the environment's severity. Every sip reminds people that the desert demands adaptation, not indulgence. Yet in this harshness lies a kind of stability, a reassurance that knowledge passed through generations continues to shield those who trust it. More importantly, fermented milk reveals a deeper truth. Survival in the Sahara relies not on abundance, but on transformation. By altering what they have, people create something more durable than its original form. something that can endure heat, time, and distance better than they can alone. These details show that fermented milk is not simply a drink, but a shield protecting the body where clean water cannot always be trusted. Beyond this fragile nourishment, survival depends on identifying plants and roots that offer relief when illness or exhaustion threatens to weaken a traveler's strength. Under the shifting sun, even the smallest herb can decide the difference between resilience and decline. Herbs and edible desert plants form a quiet but essential layer of survival in the Sahara, offering remedies and nourishment in places where almost nothing seems capable of growing. At first glance, the landscape appears empty, with stretches of sand, scattered rocks, and wind-shaped ridges that hide life rather than reveal it. Yet those who have lived in the desert for generations understand that the harshest environments often conceal the most valuable resources. Hidden among dry shrubs beneath layers of dust or clinging stubbornly to rocky ground plants emerge that serve both as food and medicine, shaping the rhythms and resilience of entire communities. The Tuareg, along with other desert groups, have preserved knowledge of these plants through centuries of observation and experience. This wisdom does not come from books or written guides, but from close attention to the land passed quietly from elders to younger generations. Children learn early how to distinguish between plants that soothe the stomach, plants that heal wounds, and those that can be eaten sparingly to stretch scarce food supplies. Each lesson is delivered with the seriousness of a survival rule, not simply a cultural tradition. One of the most recognized desert plants is the hardy shrub, whose leaves can be boiled into a mild tea. The infusion helps ease digestion, particularly during long journeys when dryness and fatigue strain the body. Its bitterness is a reminder that comfort is secondary to purpose. Travelers sip slowly, allowing the warmth to settle in their stomachs, reducing discomfort and helping them maintain energy without relying on heavier foods. This small comfort becomes significant during days when movement must continue despite exhaustion. Other plants provide edible roots that retain moisture even under extreme heat. These roots must be dug carefully from beneath the sand washed to remove grit and eaten raw or lightly warmed near a fire. They taste earthy and plain, yet they deliver hydration and subtle nutrients that help sustain a traveler for hours. Finding such roots is more than good fortune. It requires understanding where underground moisture collects and how certain shrubs signal the presence of water. For the inexperienced, the landscape reveals nothing. For those who have studied it, the signs are unmistakable. Some plants serve purely medicinal roles. There are stems that, when crushed, produce a sap used to treat small wounds or insect bites. There are dried leaves that can be ground into powder to reduce fever or help calm an upset stomach. There are flowers whose petals, though rare and delicate, offer relief when brewed into strong teas. None of these remedies is our absolute cure, but in a region where formal medical help is often unreachable, they provide the first line of defense against illness. Knowledge of these plants is preserved deliberately. Elders point out subtle differences in leaf shape, color, and texture. They explain how one plant can soothe, but another can harm even if the two appear nearly identical. The teaching happens during daily routines, collecting firewood, walking between camps, or tending to animals. Over time, younger members learn to read the land as instinctively as breathing, recognizing what to gather, what to avoid, and how to prepare each item correctly. Harvesting is always done with restraint. Desert plants grow slowly, and taking too much risks wipes out resources that may be needed again later. Travelers often take only what they require for the day, leaving the rest to regenerate. This discipline reinforces an understanding that survival in the Sahara depends not only on knowledge, but also on patience. Exploitation leads to scarcity. Restraint maintains balance. Some plants have particularly important roles during illness. When someone experiences dehydration or heat sickness, certain herbs help settle the stomach, allowing the person to drink more effectively. When diarrhea threatens to weaken a traveler, bitter teas made from desert leaves can slow the symptoms enough to keep them moving. When exhaustion begins to dull, the senses aromatic plants crushed between the hands can help stimulate alertness. These small interventions may seem modest, but in the Sahara, modest advantages often determine who continues and who does not. The process of preparation is simple but precise. Leaves must be cleaned thoroughly, sometimes rubbed between cloth to remove dust. Roots must be cut carefully to avoid breaking away from usable fibers. Some herbs must be dried first, others must be boiled immediately. The Tuareg maintain these distinctions with quiet confidence, knowing that mistakes waste resources or lessen their effectiveness. In a land where nearly everything is limited, precision becomes a habit ingrained into daily life. Herbs also play a role in trade. Caravans passing through often seek bundles of dried plants to carry on long journeys. Such herbs can be exchanged for grain cloth, salt, or tools, strengthening ties between distant regions. This exchange ensures that the knowledge and usefulness of desert plants extend far beyond the small communities that harvest them. A single bundle of dried leaves may travel hundreds of kilometers, serving travelers who have never met the people who prepared it. Despite their importance, desert plants retain an air of subtlety. They do not announce themselves with bright colors or lush growth. Instead, they exist quietly, offering life only to those who know how to find it. Their presence underscores a deeper truth. Survival in the Sahara is not built on dramatic discoveries, but on careful attention to small details that others overlook. To those who rely on this knowledge, the desert is not empty. It is full of answers hidden beneath harshness, waiting for those who have learned to see. These details show that desert plants and herbs form an unseen network of protection, sustaining the body where food and medicine are scarce. Beyond this quiet support, survival still depends on safeguarding every meal from the sand and wind that threaten to destroy it. Under the desert's shifting gusts, even a single grain of dust can undo hours of careful preparation. Protecting food from drifting sand is one of the most constant challenges of life in the Sahara. The wind does not announce itself gently. It arrives with force, lifting grains of sand that cut across the air like dust made of glass. Even on calm days, fine particles drift, quietly settling onto anything left uncovered. These grains may seem harmless, but to desert families they represent contamination, illness, and the loss of meals that required hours of work to prepare. Safeguarding food becomes an ongoing effort, woven into every task, from cooking to storage. Sand has a way of reaching places that seem impossible. It slips beneath lids, works its way through cracks in containers, and enters through the smallest gaps in woven bags. Once inside, it clings stubbornly to surfaces. Eating contaminated food is more than unpleasant. It can wear down teeth, disrupt digestion, and cause infection if the sand carries pathogens picked up during storms. For people who rely on steady, careful nourishment, losing any portion of food to contamination can be a serious setback. Communities respond by sealing everything with intention. Leather bags are among the most trusted tools for protection. Crafted from treated hides, they remain flexible enough to tie tightly, yet sturdy enough to resist tearing. Families keep several sizes, each designed for different purposes. Small pouches for dried herbs, larger bags for preserved meat or bread, and wide containers for storing dates. Every bag is tied with deliberate knots tightened until no gap remains, ensuring that sand finds no easy entry. Dry leaves also serve as wrapping material. When layered carefully, they create a breathable yet protective barrier that shields food from drifting dust. These leaves are gathered during rare moments of growth around oases, dried thoroughly and stored until needed. Their natural texture repels fine particles, making them ideal for wrapping smaller portions of food that must be eaten quickly or carried during travel. The process of wrapping is slow but vital, with layers folded over one another like armor against the desert's constant abrasion. Cooking areas require equal caution. Before preparing any meal, families clear a space, smoothing the ground, and creating windbreaks using stones, shields, or stacked bundles of wood. These barriers do not stop the wind entirely, but they reduce the amount of sand that blows directly across the food. Whenever possible, meals are prepared behind tents, dune ridges, or rock formations that offer natural protection. Even a narrow strip of shade can create enough stillness for safe cooking. During windstorms, the battle against sand intensifies. People cover food, immediately closing containers and wrapping meals before the wind gathers strength. Children help secure materials, weighing down the edges of cloth with stones to prevent them from lifting. The air fills with a harsh scraping sound as sand strikes fabric, leather, and skin. Meals planned for the day may be postponed, replaced with small portions of dried food that can be eaten directly from sealed bags. These moments reinforce why protection must always be instinctive, never optional. Nomadic groups have developed portable solutions for food safety. Some carry collapsible leather covers, which can be stretched over cooking stones or laid across baskets of food. Others rely on tightly woven mats made from desert grasses, rolled and unrolled with ease. These mats are surprisingly effective. Their dense weave blocks sand while remaining light enough for travel. Over generations, Each family refines their techniques, adjusting materials and designs to adapt to shifting conditions. Food storage in tents follows a strict order. Items meant for daily use are kept near the entrance, where they can be accessed quickly, while longer-term stores are placed deep inside, away from open flaps where drafts may enter. Elevated shelves keep food off the ground, reducing contact with dust that settles during calm periods. Containers are inspected regularly, wiped clean, and retied if even the slightest looseness appears. This routine is never rushed, because any lapse risks the contamination of food meant to last for weeks. The constant presence of sand shapes how people think about food. Every action, cooking, eating, storing, packing, is performed with an awareness that a single gust can undo hours of effort. Yet this precaution does not produce anxiety. It produces discipline. Families learn to respect the wind's unpredictability, accepting that careful preparation is the only reliable defense. These habits become as natural as breathing, integrated into daily life, in a way that feels steady rather than burdensome. Even trade goods must be protected. When caravans arrive, food intended for exchange is inspected first, to ensure it remains free of grit. A bag contaminated with sand loses value quickly, as no traveler wishes to carry spoiled supplies across long distances. For this reason, people preparing goods for trade wrap them meticulously, knowing their reputation depends on maintaining the highest level of care. A well-protected pouch of dates or bundle of dried meat strengthens trust between communities, signaling reliability in a land where trust is as precious as water. In the end, keeping sand out of food is not merely a matter of comfort, it is survival. The desert demands constant vigilance, and those who adapt to its demands learn to shield every meal with the same seriousness they apply to finding water or navigating dunes. Protection becomes a form of resilience, reflecting the quiet determination that allows life to persist, where the environment tries endlessly to strip it away. These details show that guarding food from drifting sand is not a precaution but a necessity, preserving every meal against a landscape that destroys without effort. Beyond these protective habits, survival soon turns toward methods that use the desert's heat itself as a tool rather than an enemy. In that stark sunlight, families learn to make the sun their fire, turning scarcity into opportunity. Using the heat of the sun to cook is one of the most practical and enduring techniques in the Sahara. Shaped by an environment where firewood is scarce and energy must be conserved with unwavering discipline. In this vast desert, sunlight is constant, intense, and inescapable. Rather than treating it as an obstacle, desert families learn to harness its power, turning the overwhelming heat of midday into a natural stove. This approach reflects a deeper truth about life here. Survival grows not from resisting the land, but from adapting to its rhythms, using every force available, even the harshness of the sun. Cooking without fire begins with selecting containers that can withstand the heat. Tightly sealed jars, metal tins, or thick clay vessels are used depending on what a family possesses. These containers must protect food from sand while holding enough heat to warm or cook it gradually. Once filled, often with grains, dried meat softened, with a little moisture or small pieces of root, the containers are placed directly under the sun, where temperatures rise to levels capable of transforming the ingredients inside. In the depths of midday, when the ground itself burns the soles of travelers' feet, these vessels become slow-cooking ovens. The process is patient rather than dramatic. There is no crackling of fire or scent of smoke to signal progress. Instead, people check the containers by touch, feeling how the heat travels through the material. The warmth intensifies as the sun arcs overhead and the contents soften slowly. For desert families, this quiet transformation is a familiar rhythm, one that mirrors the stillness imposed by the environment during the hottest hours of the day. While people rest in what little shade they can find, the sun continues its work without interruption. This method is especially useful on long journeys, where building fires is impractical. Firewood cannot be wasted, and stopping to cook traditionally would require effort that drains precious energy. Instead, travelers prepare their containers in the morning, letting the day's heat soften grains, warm preserved food, or cook mixtures that require only gentle heat. By sunset, the meal is ready, warm, edible, and prepared with no strain on the body or the environment. This practice allows people to keep moving, reserving strength for navigation, carrying loads, or managing animals. The technique also supports safety. Fires attract attention, consume resources, and expose travelers to wind that can scatter embers unpredictably. Sandstorms can extinguish flames without warning, and wood often burns too quickly to cook anything substantial. Sun-based cooking avoids these risks entirely. The method depends only on the certainty that the sun will rise, intensify, and remain dominant throughout the day. In the Sahara, that certainty is as reliable as any tool. Knowledge of sun cooking is passed through generations with small refinements. Elders teach younger members how to position containers at slight angles to catch the most light, how to adjust placement when shadows shift, and how to choose surfaces, flat stones, packed sand, or elevated shelves that amplify heat. They explain which foods respond best to slow warmth and which require a brief addition of water before sealing. These details appear simple, but they determine whether the meal will be edible or wasted, and waste is never tolerated. The method also preserves fuel for when it is truly needed. Nights can be cold in the desert, and families save their firewood for those hours when warmth is a necessity. During storms or emergencies, fire serves more critical roles, boiling water, signaling others, and scaring away animals. By relying on the sun for cooking whenever possible, people store wood for moments that cannot be managed through adaptation alone. This form of planning becomes an act of foresight ingrained deeply in desert culture. Despite its simplicity, sun cooking creates moments of quiet connection. Families gather their containers in the early morning, organizing ingredients while the air remains cool. They place each jar carefully, understanding that the harsh heat that torments travelers can also nourish them. In the afternoon, when sunlight makes movement difficult, they check their meals slowly, appreciating the gradual change inside each vessel. When evening comes and the lids open, the warm food carries a sense of patience rewarded. Travelers who rely on this method describe a unique relationship with time. Cooking becomes a process aligned with the movement of the sun rather than the demands of hunger. Meals are prepared early, but eaten late, teaching endurance and reinforcing the rhythm of desert life. This harmony with the environment is not romantic but practical. The land dictates the pace, and people adapt to it with the calm acceptance born from necessity. Even trade routes reflect this practice. Caravans often travel with containers designed specifically for solar cooking, ensuring that large groups can be fed without consuming valuable firewood. Travelers share techniques, compare container styles, and exchange small cloths or seals that help retain heat. These interactions weave the method into a larger network of desert tradition. Sun cooking reveals that the Sahara is not hostile without purpose. Its intensity, though dangerous, provides tools that allow life to persist. Those who understand how to use the sun's strength turn hardship into utility, shaping meals from heat that others might fear. These details show that sun-based cooking is not improvisation but strategy, turning the desert's harshest force into a consistent resource. Beyond these quiet techniques, survival reaches a stage where only inherited knowledge can guide families through shifting and uncertain terrain. Across the silent dunes, wisdom carried through generations becomes its own form of nourishment. Survival in the Sahara begins long before a traveler takes their first step across the sand. It begins in the quiet hours, when the young sit with the old, listening to stories shaped by decades of hardship, loss, and endurance. Among desert communities, wisdom is not learned through books or formal teaching. It comes through presence, repetition, and the steady voice of someone who has already survived everything the dunes can inflict. These gatherings, often at dusk when the heat loosens its grip, are less like lessons and more like the handing over of a fragile shield. Without this shield, no one truly lasts long in the open desert. The elders teach slowly without urgency because they know that wisdom absorbed too quickly is easily forgotten. Their words are anchored in real events, journeys where water was scarce, nights when storms erased familiar paths, mornings when a single mistake separated life from death. The younger listeners understand that these stories are not to be admired but memorized. Each detail is a tool. Each warning is the map of someone who walked ahead of them, leaving faint footprints that still matter. Many of the lessons concern water, the most unforgiving element of desert life. Elders explain the subtle signs that reveal where moisture hides beneath the sand. A faint darkening of the ground, the unexpected presence of insects, the way a plant bends at dawn. They teach how to test water by taste alone, identifying rancid sources even when thirst becomes overwhelming. Young travelers learn to respect the difference between caution and panic, because drinking from the wrong pool has ended more lives than starvation or exposure. Food knowledge passes through the generations in much the same way. Children and young adults learn which roots can be scraped clean without wasting moisture, which bushes hide insects rich in protein, and which dried fragments of plants signal toxicity strong enough to sicken a grown person. These lessons are not dramatic. They are practical, repetitive, and necessary. In a land with few choices, knowing the correct choice becomes the foundation of survival. Observation plays just as important a role as spoken instruction. Elders rarely interrupt the rhythm of daily tasks to explain what they are doing. Instead, they allow the young to watch how meat is dried, how water skins are wrapped, how rations are divided, so nothing is wasted. The quiet precision of these actions becomes its own language. Even without words, the younger generation senses that every motion is deliberate. Nothing is hurried, nothing is careless, nothing is left to chance. During travel, silence becomes another form of teaching. Elders seldom speak unless necessary, but their glances guide the group more effectively than commands. A shift in the wind might prompt a slight alteration in direction. A change in the texture of sand prompts more frequent water checks. The youngest members of the group learn to read these silent signals, understanding that the desert rarely announces danger loudly. Its threats arrive softly, disguised as ordinary moments. Mirages form another critical part of generational teaching. The elders describe them not as magical illusions, but as predictable traps created by heat and exhaustion. They explain how many travelers have wasted precious strength chasing reflections of water or shadows that resembled distant groves. The young are taught to distrust anything that appears too easily, too suddenly, or too brightly. True water, they are told, is rarely found in places that seem inviting. Rituals also preserve memory. Before large journeys, elders recount older tales of families who crossed the same regions generations earlier. These accounts include landmarks that may no longer exist, collapsed wells, shifting dunes, and lost trails. But the logic within them remains valuable. The stories teach problem-solving rather than specific directions. They reinforce that survival lies not in following a fixed plan, but in adapting with intelligence that grows from experience. Patience is another theme woven throughout these teachings. Young travelers often begin with confidence, believing strength or speed can offset inexperience. The elders correct this gently but firmly. They remind the young that the desert cares nothing for enthusiasm. It rewards preparation and punishes impatience. They warn that losing composure is more dangerous than losing supplies, because panic narrows vision and makes illusions appear real. Calmness, they say, keeps a person alive longer than any blade or tool. Over time, young members of the community begin to recognize the true value of their elders. They see that age, though limiting the ability to walk long distances, brings a form of protection as essential as water. The oldest individuals remember patterns in the land, wind routes, seasonal shifts, and animal migrations that younger eyes cannot yet interpret. Their presence transforms a dangerous journey into one defined by steady decisions rather than fear. This transfer of knowledge is not dramatic or ceremonial. It happens gradually through repetition and observation, until one day the younger generation realizes they have memorized teachings without trying to. They find themselves repeating the same words their elders once used, warning others in the same steady tone. In this way, survival becomes a shared inheritance, rather than an individual struggle. The desert may be harsh, but memory softens its edges, just enough to allow life to continue. All of this shows that inherited knowledge is not tradition for its own sake, but a practical shield against mistakes that would end a journey before it begins. Beyond these teachings, the desert demands choices shaped by the rhythm of heat and darkness rather than preference or comfort. Across that shifting landscape, travel under the stars becomes the only path left for those who wish to endure. Night travel in the Sahara is less a choice than a necessary surrender to the logic of heat, distance, and survival. When the sun falls, the desert changes its nature. The harsh light that blinds becomes a dim glow on sand, ridges the burning air cools to something breathable, and footsteps no longer feel as if they are sinking into fire. Families who move across this landscape understand that the hours after dusk are the only hours that truly belong to them. Traveling by day would drain their strength long before any destination appeared. But traveling by night allows their bodies to conserve moisture, slow their heartbeat, and cross distances that daylight would turn into punishment. The evenings begin with stillness. People sit close to the ground eating a small meal, not for pleasure but for fuel. The portions are controlled, chosen carefully to avoid thirst. A little grain, a piece of dried fruit, perhaps a sip of milk, enough to sustain the body, but not enough to overwhelm it. Eating too much before a night march would create heat from digestion, and heat would force the body to lose water. Even this small detail becomes an act of calculation. Those who ignore it learn quickly how unforgiving the desert can be. Once darkness settles, the group moves in formation. In the faint moonlight, the dunes look like waves turned to stone, and the sky becomes a vast companion stretching endlessly above them. The ground cools as the hours pass, making each step lighter. Distances that felt impossible under the sun now seem manageable. Silence dominates. Conversations are rare, partly to conserve breath, partly because people instinctively feel the need to listen to the wind, to the camels, to the shifting sand beneath their feet. Survival depends not on strength but on attention. Sleeping during the day is uncomfortable but necessary. Families build shade from cloth branches or the sides of dunes, creating pockets of darkness where the heat is less violent. Rest is shallow and often disrupted by blowing sand or rising temperatures, yet it is still essential. Without these daytime hours of stillness, nighttime movement would become impossible. Children learn early that the desert does not bend to human schedules. They sleep when the land demands it, not when they choose. Adults wrap themselves tightly, breathing slowly, saving water in every possible way. The desert's rhythm becomes the traveler's rhythm. They wake when the air cools enough to breathe deeply. They move when their shadows disappear in the night. They pause only when their animals show signs of strain or when the stars shift into positions used for navigation. The older members of the group read the constellations the way others might read maps. A slight tilt in the sky's familiar patterns signals when to adjust direction, when to descend from a dune, or when to continue without hesitation. This knowledge acts as a silent guide, allowing the night journey to unfold with purpose rather than fear. As hours pass, the body adapts. The cool air feels almost like comfort compared to the scorching daylight. Footsteps become steady, even graceful, as travelers find their pace. A quiet determination binds them together. They know that stopping too long will cause the cold to settle into their bones, and moving too slowly will expose them to the rising sun before they are ready. Timing is everything. The final stretch before dawn is always the hardest, when exhaustion begins to whisper that rest is more important than distance. But stopping early can be fatal. They push forward until the sky lightens and the temperature begins to shift upward, marking the moment they must seek shelter again. Those who try to walk by day learn quickly why this cycle exists. Heat rises in waves, distorting vision and burning skin within minutes. Breath becomes thin. Water evaporates faster than it can be swallowed. Animals slow down and grow restless. Every movement feels heavier, sharper, more punishing. In that environment, survival shrinks to minutes rather than hours. The contrast reinforces the wisdom passed down for generations. The desert rewards those who walk with it, not against it. Traveling at night is not without danger. Predators sometimes prowl the cooler hours. Sudden winds can erase landmarks. Dunes can shift unexpectedly. Yet these risks are small compared to the certainty of heat. People learn to trust the soft crunch of sand beneath their feet, the subtle cues from their animals, and the feel of the air changing around them. They learn endurance, patience, and rhythm. More importantly, they learn that survival is not about speed, but about understanding the land. By the time they reach the next resting point, fatigue mixes with relief. Fires are rarely lit, since flames attract attention and waste energy. Instead, families settle quietly, sharing what little water they have, covering themselves from the coming heat. Their progress may seem slow to an outsider, but each night's journey represents a triumph of discipline over environment. All of this shows that night travel is not a preference, but a strategy shaped by necessity and endurance. Beyond these disciplined movements, life pushes travelers to find moments of safety in the shifting terrain, creating small shelters that shield both food and bodies from the relentless elements. Further ahead, shelter itself becomes a matter of survival, not comfort. Setting up camp in the Sahara is never a casual act. It is a deliberate calculation shaped by heat terrain and the constant threat of losing precious food to the sun. Travelers learn quickly that shade is not comfort, but survival. Even the smallest patch of darkness beneath a rock ledge, or the thin shadow of a dune, can mean the difference between preserving what little they have and watching it spoil within minutes. When a group stops to rest, the first task is not eating or tending to animals, but scanning the land for any form of shelter that can shield them from the rising heat. The eye becomes trained to recognize subtle features: a dip in the ground, a slight curve of sand, the base of a cliff, or a cluster of dry bushes, can provide enough protection to lower the temperature around the camp. Families spread out briefly, searching for a place where wind can pass through without bringing too much sand, and where the sun's direction will create lasting shade. Every decision echoes past experiences, those moments when poor choices led to food turning, rancid water becoming too warm to drink, or skin burning under the harsh light. The desert teaches its lessons quickly, and it expects them to be remembered. Once a suitable area is found, the real work begins. Fabric made from thick cloth or woven fibers is stretched between poles or anchored with stones. These makeshift roofs do not block all heat, but they diffuse it enough to make breathing easier and resting possible. Animal hides are used when cloth is unavailable. Their weight offers strong resistance against wind, though they often trap a faint smell of heat and dust. Where fabric is limited, people press themselves close to the sides of dunes or into shallow depressions, letting the earth itself shield them. The land becomes part of the shelter, and shelter becomes part of survival. Food is stored immediately in shaded spots. A sack of grain is tucked beneath fabric, sealed tightly to keep out sand. Dried meat is placed under layers of hide. Water skins are positioned where wind can brush past them without being exposed to direct sun. People check these items often, as even a brief mistake, leaving something uncovered, or forgetting to bind a container, can destroy supplies that took days to gather. Shade protects more than bodies. It protects the journey itself. Resting in these camps is a quiet ritual. Conversations soften, movements slow. Children lie still beside their parents, learning through imitation how to conserve energy. Even the animals settle in the shadows, their bodies angled to take in the slightest breeze. Those who are responsible for maintaining the camp sit near the edges, listening for changes in the wind. A sudden shift can carry sand into the shelter or collapse the fragile structures holding the fabric in place. Everything must be adjusted gently, without wasting breath or strength. The wind, when it comes, feels like a companion rather than a threat. A steady flow of air cools the skin and carries away the heaviness of heat. People position themselves to capture every bit of it, turning their faces slightly or lifting their clothing to feel the shift. Yet they remain alert. Wind can quickly become a storm, and storms can bury a camp faster than anyone can react. The desert rewards awareness and punishes distraction. As the hottest hours pass, the camp becomes a small island of endurance in a sea of shimmering sand. The shade lengthens, offering relief, not through luxury, but through consistency. People rest their backs against stones or folded cloth, close their eyes and breathe slowly. Their minds drift between exhaustion and vigilance. They understand that this stillness is only temporary. Night will come, and with night comes movement again. But for now, the shade holds them, protects them, and keeps their supplies safe until the desert allows them to continue. Some camps are built in the same places used by past generations. Families recognize these spots through stories or markers left long ago. A particular rock formation may signal dependable wind patterns. A certain slope of a dune may guarantee morning shade. These inherited sites carry a sense of quiet wisdom, as if the land itself remembers the many lives that pass through. Resting there feels different, slightly more secure, slightly more connected to those who endured the same challenges. Yet no camp, no matter how carefully built, offers full safety. Heat always threatens, wind always tests, and sand always waits to intrude. People accept this uncertainty. Their shelters are meant not to defeat the desert, but to coexist with it, to borrow its features in ways that grant them a few more hours of strength. They know the land cannot be controlled, only respected. All of this shows that finding shade is less about comfort than about protecting food, water, and strength in a landscape that strips these away without mercy. Beyond this fragile shelter, the next challenge rises from the creatures that roam the sand and reveal hidden paths to nourishment. Along those shifting tracks, survival begins to echo the instincts of animals that know the land better than any map. Reading the desert through the behavior of animals becomes one of the most reliable survival strategies for those who cross the Sahara. People who move across this landscape learn early that the creatures living here are not merely part of the scenery. They are experts shaped by generations of adaptation. Their movements, their pauses, the direction of their travel, even the rhythm of their breathing, can reveal where life still hides in a land that seems almost empty. Travelers do not follow animals out of curiosity, but out of necessity, because the desert gives its secrets to those who pay attention to its quietest inhabitants. Camels are the first teachers. These animals carry instinct within them, a memory of routes that stretch beyond human recollection. When they grow restless, humans know to look for changes in the weather. When they slow their pace in a particular area, the ground beneath may offer softer sand that suggests moisture deep below. When they lift their heads and taste, the air travelers understand that plants or water may be ahead. People who walk beside camels soon learn that the animal's awareness exceeds their own, and that ignoring such signals would be careless, even dangerous. Smaller creatures become guides as well. Desert foxes leave delicate tracks that vanish quickly in shifting sand, yet those who study them learn to read the faint impressions before the wind erases them. A fox that moves in a winding pattern may be hunting insects, which means nearby vegetation provides shelter for them. A fox that travels in a straight line often heads toward a reliable water source, moving with purpose toward a place it has visited many times. Following these tracks requires patience and attention. Each step must be studied, each change in direction considered. But those who persist often find what they need. Birds reveal even more. In the early morning, their flight paths form quiet markers above the dunes. A sudden dip in their movement may indicate a patch of greenery or a hidden well. Some circles repeatedly above areas where insects gather, and where insects survive, water cannot be far. Travelers watch these movements with focused eyes, knowing that the behavior of a single bird can save an entire group from wandering into danger. The sky becomes a secondary map, shifting constantly, but reliable for those who understand its signs. Even insects play their part. Ants often dig small tunnels in surprisingly orderly patterns, and these patterns form near plants whose roots reach down into moisture. Beetles move across the sand in ways that reflect temperature changes in the ground, revealing where shade persists or where food might be found. These details are minute, almost invisible to the untrained eye, but to people accustomed to desert life, they speak with clarity. Observing them becomes second nature, as automatic as breathing. Animals do not simply show where resources exist. They also reveal where danger lies. When herds avoid a particular valley, travelers take note. When birds refuse to settle in a certain cluster of rocks, humans understand that predators may be waiting there. When foxes veer suddenly away from a dune, it may indicate unstable ground beneath. The behavior of animals forms a language of warnings, silent but unmistakable, shaping the decisions of those who must cross difficult terrain. Night travel adds another layer of connection to these guides. In the dim light, animals move with more confidence and travelers follow their rhythms. A camel's steady pace becomes the measure of time. The flicker of movement in the corner of one's vision may indicate a lizard darting towards shade, marking an area that retains pockets of cooler air. Even the sound of wings passing overhead carries meaning, guiding travelers toward areas where insects thrive under moonlight. Using animal knowledge does not feel like imitation, but partnership. People and creatures coexist in the same harsh world, each adapting to survive the extremes of heat, cold, and scarcity. Over generations, humans learn not to impose their will on the land, but to borrow the instincts of beings that have lived here longer. In doing so, they develop an understanding of the Sahara that cannot be taught solely through words. It must be lived, practiced, and refined through countless journeys. This approach does not guarantee safety. Tracks can fade, animals can mislead when fleeing predators, and sudden winds can erase all signs. Yet following these guides remains far more reliable than wandering without direction. Travelers know that the desert hides water in unexpected places, food in unlikely forms, and shade where none seems to exist. Animals reveal these truths simply by existing in the landscape, their bodies responding naturally to conditions humans struggle to interpret. Over time, the connection deepens. A traveler who once studied tracks now recognizes them instantly. A child who once asked questions now points with confidence toward the path a fox took the night before. Entire communities grow around this shared knowledge, passing it down not as folklore, but as an essential survival skill. Animals in their quiet way become teachers for every generation. All of this shows that the creatures of the desert are not background figures, but living maps that help travelers find both danger and nourishment. Beyond this silent guidance, the struggle for survival tightens when food sources shrink to the smallest and most unexpected forms. Through that narrowing path, even the tiniest creatures become vital to staying alive. Choosing to eat insects in the Sahara is rarely a matter of preference. It is the point one reaches when all other options have disappeared. Hunger in the desert is a slow tightening pressure, hollowing the body and sharpening the mind toward anything that might sustain life. When plants grow sparse, when game moves beyond reach, and when supplies run low, Insects transform from background noise into the final line between survival and collapse. Those who travel long distances come to understand that a handful of xiaoqiu, or a few bo kung, can offer enough protein to push them through another day, a reality that feels harsh at first, but becomes familiar with time. Locating insects begins with observation. Travelers search near patches of dry vegetation where grasshoppers gather to feed or around small mounds of disturbed sand where beetles hide beneath the surface. In cooler hours, insects move more slowly, making them easier to catch. A person might crouch for long stretches, watching for the slightest flicker of motion. Patience becomes a form of endurance, the body held still, so that the desert's smallest creatures reveal themselves. Children learn this skill early, their eyes sharp and instinctive, often spotting insects before adults do. Collecting enough insects to make a meal requires repetition. Hands move quickly, capturing clusters of grasshoppers or scooping beetles into cloth sacks. The sound of wings fluttering inside a container becomes strangely comforting evidence that food has been secured. But the collection is only the beginning. Without proper preparation, these creatures can make illness far more dangerous than hunger itself. People have learned through generations that roasting or heating insects is essential. The desert may be harsh, but it is full of toxins that must be neutralized before anything is eaten. Roasting takes place on hot stones or in shallow pits filled with warm coals. Grasshoppers crackle slightly as their bodies dry the texture, changing from soft to crisp. Beetles require more care. Their shells can trap heat unevenly, so they must be turned repeatedly. The smell is subtle but distinct, a mixture of earthiness and heat that signals the transition from raw to edible. There is no seasoning, no attempt to disguise the origin of the food. Survival strips meals of decoration, leaving only what keeps the body standing. Insects, once roasted, provide an unexpected amount of strength. The body absorbs the protein quickly, easing the dizziness that accompanies prolonged hunger. Even a small handful can restore balance to a traveler who has walked too long without sustenance. Still, the psychological challenge remains. The first time someone is forced to eat insects, hesitation lingers. But that hesitation fades when the alternative becomes clear. People in the Sahara learn to see insects not as pests, but as resources, each one holding enough energy to carry them a few steps farther towards safety. Gathering insects also teaches humility. The desert does not offer abundance, it offers fragments. A handful of xiaoqiu is not a feast, but it is enough. A group of beetles does not satisfy hunger completely, but it prevents collapse. Travelers adjust their expectations accordingly. They come to value these small sources of nourishment as gifts from the land, no matter how unappealing they might seem from a distance. Insects become symbols of resilience, reminders that survival depends on adapting to whatever the desert permits. There is danger, however, in choosing the wrong species or preparing them incorrectly. Some insects carry toxins that roasting cannot destroy. Others feed on plants that cause sickness when consumed secondhand. Experienced travelers know which insects to avoid, having learned from the stories of those who fell ill after eating something unfamiliar. The desert's margin for error is narrow, and food gathered without knowledge can turn strength into weakness. For this reason, communities pass down detailed instructions, ensuring that every generation understands which creatures offer life and which conceal harm. Nighttime changes the equation once again. Some insects become more active in the cooler hours, clustering around small plants or hovering above patches of disturbed sand. Hunters must move quietly, guided by sound rather than sight. The faint clicking of beetle legs or the whisper of wings against dry air becomes a call that draws travelers closer. These nocturnal searches can be exhausting, but they offer opportunities unavailable during the day. Hunger does not wait for sunlight, and those who must eat cannot afford to ignore what darkness provides. Over time, reliance on insects becomes less of an emergency measure and more of a predictable part of desert life. Even when other foods are available, people keep the knowledge close, understanding that circumstances can shift without warning. A failed hunt, a sudden storm, or an unexpected journey can leave them with little more than the insects at their feet. Knowing how to find and prepare them becomes as crucial as navigating by the stars or reading the wind. Insects, despite their small size, reflect the larger truth of Sahara. Survival endurance is built from countless small decisions, each one preserving a little more strength than the one before. Eating them does not signify defeat. It signifies adaptation. It is the choice made by those who understand the land intimately enough to accept what it offers, no matter how humble. All of this shows that turning to insects is not desperation, but a practical acceptance of the desert's smallest sources of strength. Beyond this stark reality, the struggle deepens as travelers learn to guard every movement, understanding that even their own bodies can betray them through wasted energy. Across the tightening horizon, endurance depends on conserving what little remains. Survival in the Sahara is not built on strength, but on restraint. Every action, every breath, every step becomes a calculation. Because losing energy in this landscape is the same as losing water, and water is the single measure that decides who endures and who fades. Travelers learn quickly that the desert does not forgive unnecessary movement. It rewards stillness, patience, and an ability to quiet the body, even when instinct urges otherwise. To move too fast, to panic, to sweat freely under the sun, these are mistakes that turn a manageable journey into a fatal one. The heat shapes every decision. Even small motions can trigger sweat, and each drop is a loss the desert never gives back. People walk slowly, not out of laziness, but out of wisdom, letting their bodies remain as calm as the sand beneath their feet. Their pace rarely changes whether they feel tired or restless. Steadiness becomes a kind of shield against the elements. The young often struggle with this lesson, wanting to run ahead or shift constantly. But elders remind them gently that haste has no place in a land where water is life. During the hottest hours, movement nearly stops altogether. Families settle into whatever shade they can find, forming small islands of quiet beneath cloth, rock, or dune shadows. They rest without speaking, conserving not only physical strength but also breath. Even talking becomes a luxury. Words cost air, and air carries moisture. Each exhalation is a small offering to the desert, and those who give too much soon feel the consequences tightening in their throats. Silence is not a cultural habit, but a survival strategy. Food, too, becomes a matter of energy management. Eating too much at once forces the body into work, digesting, warming, and reacting, and this produces heat. Heat demands water. Water must never be wasted. For that reason, meals are intentionally small and spaced carefully throughout the day. A mouthful of grain, a bite of dried fruit, a sip of fermented milk, enough to stabilize the body to keep hunger in check, but not enough to spark an internal fire. Travelers distinguish between what satisfies appetite and what sustains life, choosing the latter without hesitation. The same principle applies to emotional control. Panic accelerates the heartbeat, fear makes breathing shallow and rapid, anger pushes the body into unnecessary tension. The desert punishes all of these reactions. People are taught from childhood to regulate their emotions as carefully as their steps. When something goes wrong, a lost route, a broken container, an approaching sandstorm, they sink into calm rather than urgency. Their voices soften, their movements slow even further. Keeping the body cool begins with keeping the mind quiet. Animals mirror this behavior. Camels conserve energy instinctively, lowering their heart rate, resting frequently, and avoiding sudden motion, except when threatened. Travelers observe them closely, learning that survival often means doing less, not more. The desert favors those who understand how to disappear into its rhythm rather than fight against it. Those who treat it like a challenge to conquer inevitably exhaust themselves long before the journey ends. Even the shade becomes part of this careful balance. Movement between shadowed patches is timed precisely. People cross exposed areas quickly, but without rushing, maintaining a pace that avoids sweating, while still minimizing time spent under direct sun. When they reach the next shaded point, they settle immediately, letting their breathing return to a slow, steady pattern. Their bodies become instruments of control, tuned deliberately to endure the extremes around them. Water consumption follows the same measured approach. Drinking too quickly can shock the system and cause the body to sweat. Instead, people take small sips, spaced evenly, allowing hydration to settle in gradually. Every drop is respected. Containers are checked repeatedly to ensure nothing leaks. Spills are treated with a seriousness others might reserve for the loss of a valuable possession. Water is not simply precious, it is irreplaceable. Rest, too, is not indulgence, but necessity. People sleep whenever conditions allow, even if only for short periods. These pockets of rest help maintain enough strength to continue walking when night returns. The desert reshapes the concept of time. Nights and days cease to be markers of routine, and instead become indicators of when energy should be stored or spent. Those who ignore this cycle find themselves depleted at the worst possible moments. Over time, the discipline becomes instinct. Travelers instinctively choose routes with softer sand, knowing that harder ground requires less effort. They adjust their posture to minimize strain. They distribute the weight of supplies across the group to avoid overburdening a single person. Every habit develops from countless experiences of scarcity, danger, and survival. The principle is simple yet profound. Waste nothing. Waste no strength, no breath, no movement. In the Sahara, excess is a threat, not a comfort. Life continues by stripping actions down to what is essential. All of this shows that conserving energy is not caution, but a requirement shaped by heat distance and the unforgiving nature of the desert. Beyond this measured stillness, the land forces a final discipline, choosing patience over exhaustion as travelers navigate their last reserves of strength. Within that narrowing horizon, the hardest truth appears. Survival demands learning how to endure with almost nothing left. When the journey ends and the desert falls into silence, the question lingers like a faint breath carried by the last drift of wind. How did they survive at all? A land without electricity, without running water, without markets or roads. A land that seems designed not for human life, but for its erasure. And yet people crossed it, lived in it, raised children in it, and built stories strong enough to outlast the dunes that swallowed whole caravans. Their survival was not a miracle. In the grand sense, no thunder striking, no sudden abundance falling from the sky. It was a collection of small decisions made day after day, steps taken slowly but steadily, a discipline shaped by the truth that life here depended on simplicity and awareness more than strength. Those who walked the Sahara understood that endurance came from attention. Every sound mattered, every shift of wind, every trace of movement in the sand. They learned to recognize faint signs the way others read books, the outline of a fox's track meaning water somewhere ahead, the sharp cry of a bird indicating vegetation hidden behind a ridge, the scent of wet earth drifting through dry air. After months of absence, these signals became companions, comforting in their reliability. Without them, the desert would remain mute and impossible. With them, it became a map written in quiet detail. Food was never plentiful, yet it appeared when needed, though never in generous forms. A cluster of dates drying under the sun, a bowl of milk shared before dawn, a handful of insects roasted until crisp, a small piece of dried meat tucked away for emergencies. Each one became a thread woven into the fabric of survival. There were no feasts, no moments of excess, only sustenance carefully measured so that the next day could exist. To waste even a crumb was to insult the desert's balance, and the desert never tolerated disrespect. Those who lived longest understood that survival was a conversation with scarcity, not a battle against it. Water shaped everything. A single drop carried meaning. Travelers treated their water skins like fragile worlds, holding them with a care rarely seen elsewhere. Every sip was intentional, taken slowly, allowing the body to absorb its worth without spilling a fraction. They planned their days around shade and silence, allowing their bodies to rest when the sun ruled the land. And at night, when the temperature softened, they walked with quiet steps across sand that seemed kinder in the dark. Daylight punished movement. Darkness protected it. This rhythm, steady and unbroken, carried them farther than force ever could. Shelter was another form of negotiation. A sliver of shadow became a refuge. A scrap of cloth stretched between two stones became a ceiling. A hollow behind a dune became a sanctuary against merciless heat. They built without expecting permanence, because nothing in the desert lasts except the desert itself. Even rest was temporary, a pause granting just enough strength for the next effort. Yet in these brief, fragile shelters they found comfort. Families huddled close, sharing warmth at night and quiet during the burning hours. In the stillness, they listened to stories told by elders, memories of storms survived, journeys taken, lessons learned. These stories did more than pass the time. They became instructions, warnings, and encouragements. They shaped the mind before the desert shaped the body. What kept them alive was not luck, as some might assume. It was discipline. The discipline to conserve sweat, to choose calm over panic, to ration food, even when hunger deepened, to observe rather than rush, to trust ancient knowledge handed down through generations. This discipline became a way of being invisible yet constant, guiding every gesture. Those who lacked it did not endure. Those who learned it became part of the land's long memory. And beneath all of this, beneath the strategies, the careful steps, the measured breaths, was something simpler, still the ability to find meaning in the smallest things. A date held in a dusty hand, a shadow stretching across a dune at midday, a soft breeze arrives after hours of still heat, a faint taste of coolness from a clay pot buried in sand, a child laughing despite the scarcity surrounding them. These moments, fragile and brief, gave weight to their endurance. They survived because life, even when stripped to its thinnest line, still carried moments of sweetness worth holding on to. The desert asked for everything, but returned wisdom. It stripped people to their essentials, revealing strength where none had seemed possible. It taught them that survival is not built from abundance, but from clarity. Clarity of need, clarity of purpose, clarity of limit. And perhaps that is why their stories remain carried through generations like quiet lanterns. Now, as we leave this journey and step back from the endless dunes, the night settles in gently. The wind lowers its voice. The world feels softer, as if the desert itself has chosen to rest. You can imagine them, those travelers gathered under a quiet sky, lying close to the earth, sharing the last of their water, feeling the cool sand against their skin. Their bodies were tired, but their spirits were steady. Their hopes are small, but persistent. A single drop of water, a single date. Sometimes, that was enough to keep a life moving forward. So let your breath slow. Let the weight of the day drift away. The desert teaches rest as much as it teaches endurance. In the stillness, there is a kind of peace that asks nothing from you, except that you let go. The stories of survival remain behind, like footprints already fading in the wind, but their lessons stay quietly within reach. Tonight, you can close your eyes, knowing that even in the harshest places, life continues through small, deliberate choices, through patience, through resilience. May your night be gentle, may your thoughts settle like sand after a long storm, and may sleep come to you the way cool air arrives in the desert, slowly, softly, unhurried. Good night, and may your rest be as steady as the steps of those who walked beneath the Sahara moon.